Call to Arms has only been out for a week in Red Dead Online, but a lot of us are hoping that the 5 missions that we got will not be the last we see of Call to Arms. The 5 we currently have include Fort Mercer, McFarland's Ranch, Blackwater, Strawberry, as well as Valentine. There are rumors circulating, according to the data miners, that we might be getting a Nightfolk Call to Arms sometime around Halloween, which could be quite interesting. What I want to do is talk about some future location ideas for Call to Arms that I would like to see eventually made, whether by Rockstar or, dare I dream, a creator mode for Call to Arms that we, the community, could make. That would be awesome as well. By the way, this is kind of a spiritual sequel to my Survivals Ideas video that I made a few months back. Feel free and check that video out. And let me know below in the comment section, what maps would you like to see future Survivals Call to Arms modes on? Feel free and let me know below in the comment section. So I compiled a list. We have some honorable mentions we'll throw in at the end of the video, but I broke it down to basically 10 different locations that I personally want to see as future maps for Call to Arms. In no particular order, we'll just go ahead and start off with Annesburg. I think that Annesburg is a very interesting town, the coal miners' town, and there's a lot we could do with that. There are all these little apartment buildings. There's the coal mine itself. So there's a lot of options for strategy and moving around Annesburg while facing wave after wave of enemies coming in either on a train, foot, horseback, even on boats, since Annesburg's right there off the Lanahatchee. I think the Annesburg would be a fantastic map for Call to Arms. The next map I want is further down the Lanahatchee, right in the middle of it, Sisika, the penitentiary itself. This island is a place that we've been wanting to go to for a while now in free roam. But every time we try to swim over there or get on a boat to row over there, well, we end up sinking to the bottom of the Lanahatchee. There are a few modes that we get to use Sisika for, but I think having it as a map for Call to Arms would be awesome. I guess the theme would be there's escaping prisoners that are armed and enemies coming to shore in boats trying to quote-unquote liberate them. And we've been brought in to help the guards bring things back under control, even though ironically our characters originated from Sisika Penitentiary for a crime we did not commit, allegedly. But I still think that Sisika as a Call to Arms map would be very good. Next, let's head out to the Heartlands for Emerald Ranch. I really do like the idea of Emerald Ranch as a map for Call to Arms. I think it would be very similar to McFarland Ranch in a lot of ways, but that's not really an issue for me personally. It's all about location, location, location. Heartlands is a completely different location than Henniganstead. And, you know, the structure of the buildings are set up a little bit differently at Emerald Ranch than McFarland Ranch, which I think would add some variety and some strats I would like to explore if Emerald Ranch was ever a map for Call to Arms. Now we're going to move up into the woods, into the Cumberland Forest, where we have another fort, Fort WALLACE. And similar to how Fort Mercer is set up, we know with the cannon in the front and the back that enemies can take control of, I really feel like Fort WALLACE would be a very interesting map as well for Call to Arms. Probably you're going in there to help the army, protect it from would-be attackers coming at you from all points. Fort WALLACE would be a very fascinating map to be on. Plus, the scenery up there is quite beautiful with the trees and everything else going on. I think it would be a fantastic map for Call to Arms. As we move down to Lemoyne, I had some options for Lemoyne. I think I ultimately decided to just pick 2 locations that are on my list. One of those would be the town of Rhodes. It makes complete sense. It would be similar to the way Valentine is set up. So there are similarities between the maps that already exist and some of these new locations as well, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. Each town, each location has its own uniqueness that would make it interesting as a map to Call to Arms. Rhodes is no exception. Just a little bit south of Rhodes is the Civil War battlefield known as Bulger Glade. I think this is one that a lot of people would very much like to see as a call to arms map. It's a little bit different than any of the other previous locations because except for the mission in the background that's seen better days, a lot of the survival and call to arms for this map would be on the ground and via trench warfare, but at the same time it would add a little something different when it comes to Bulger Glade as a map for call to arms. Plus you could actually put legit cannons around the map as well that enemies could take control of, that maybe even the player could too to fight back. But yeah, since it was once a battlefield, it serves the purpose as a battlefield once again as a call to arms map. So yeah, I think Bulger's Glade would work perfectly in that regard. As we move over into beautiful Big Valley to another ranch, Hanging Dog Ranch. And yes, similar to McFarland Ranch or Emerald Ranch, I think that you would have a similar thing where you have the enemies come in. And there's always a formula to this, wave after wave. The basic enemies on foot, then horseback, then stagecoaches, and of course the heavies, the Teddy Brown clones, snipers, the machete-wielding maniacs, the war wagons. And that's no different with Hanging Dog Ranch. But the setup for Hanging Dog Ranch is unique in its own way, which allows you to have a little bit of a strategy to it. And it's also quite beautiful right there in Big Valley. A great map location for a future call to arms map. Now we're going to move out west. And I realize we already have Fort Mercer out there. But there was definitely some other locations in New Austin that I could have gone with. And we will mention them in the honorable mentions, but of all of them, I thought that Gaptooth made the most sense because of the theme of Gaptooth. It's a mine, and the idea of going in, protecting the miners from enemies trying to rob them is an interesting premise. And it's out in the middle of the desert, it's wasteland, and you have this fortification around the mine and the building and all this stuff in the tents. I think that Gaptooth provides a unique map when it comes to call to arms. Plus, hopefully they'd roll in the dust storm for the Gaptooth map. But I do like the idea of Gaptooth being a map for call to arms. It's a little something different than what we have from the other maps. But I do like the idea of uniqueness. And there's also, as we've talked about, some similarities. But the last two are probably my two favorites on this list. Now, we're going to go all the way into the snow for this one because we currently don't have a snow call to arms map. And it makes sense because we do have the West Grizzlies up there. And there was a couple spots we could have picked for this particular map. But I just love the idea of having a call to arms survival mode on the top of Mount Hagen. That's where the final battle in the epilogue of Red Dead Redemption 2 takes place, and the buildings are still up there. And it would just be epic if we could actually do a call to arms on the top of Mount Hagen. And you'd have the standard enemies show up as usual. But one caveat, one difference that I thought would be fascinating, instead of war wagons, because it's on the top of the mountain, what if the enemy descended from above in hot air balloons that we had to take out? That would be really interesting and would add a uniqueness to Mount Hagen as a call to arms map. Plus it's cold, it's very majestic and scenic up there in the snow. But yeah, I think that I would love to have Mount Hagen as a map along with the hot air balloons for call to arms. Now the final map that I'm going to officially dive into and talk about before we get to the honorable mentions is one that we sadly probably won't get, but I'm sure a lot of you want as well. A call to arms Guarma map. And I think this one would be fantastic because Guarma is quite beautiful. It's tropical, it's in the Caribbean, and we could also tie it into Red Dead Redemption story mode, similar, even though Red Dead Redemption 2 takes place a year prior to Red Dead Online, where you go to the island of Guarma, you're helping the smugglers and the peasants free the slave workers from Colonel Fusar, as well as the Cuban soldiers that keep coming after you, whether by land or horse, by rowboats, and perhaps every now and then a Cuban warship happens to come in that you have to take out, similar to Chapter 5 of Red Dead Redemption 2. I know this one will most likely never happen because Rockstar wants us to stay as far away from Guarma as possible, but at the very least, I think that it should be used for some modes in Red Dead Online, whether it's the showdown modes, horse racing, or a call to arms map. Before we wrap up, I do have a few honorable mentions that I want to go over because I felt like they were worth talking about briefly because we have so many spots throughout Red Dead Online that would be great maps for Call to Arms. In New Austin, obviously, we got Tumbleweed, Armadillo, Rathskeller Fork, Benedict Point, Twin Rocks, Up in the Snow. Some of you thought Coulter would be a great choice. In the Swamp, we have some locations as well. Le Gras would be awesome. And I didn't mention Saint Denis for a very good reason, because that one was obvious. There's potentially 2 to 3 maps you can make out of Saint Denis, depending on the areas. Like the docks would be good. The poor area would be great. The French Quarter or the rich folk where all the mansions are, that would be another map too. But Saint Denis, I think, was a little too obvious for me to put on my list, but it was definitely an honorable mention. And like I said, it's big enough to facilitate 2, 3 to perhaps even 4 maps. Butcher's Creek is another location, Van Horn, the oil field in the Heartlands, and there's some other locations that I would like to leave reserved for a hypothetical, dare I dream, undead overrun finally brought to Red Dead Online. And I think the locations for that would include the graveyards, all the cemeteries, including the big one in Saint Denis, and some other locales like the abandoned forts. There's 2 abandoned forts. We have the abandoned town of Pleasance in Lemoyne, as well as my spirit town, Lymphony in the Heartlands. I think all that would be great maps for like an undead call to arms, or better yet, an undead overrun. So there you go. That's a list of locations that I would like to see for future call to arms maps. Let me know your thoughts, your views, and opinions. What map locations would you like to see? Feel free and put together a top 3 list, or a top 5 list, or a top 10. And also, if you want to talk about places you think would be terrible for call to arms, feel free and do that as well below in the comments section.